Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Being a quorum present to bring this meeting of the planning board to order on October 5th, 2020. Time is 7:01. First item on the agenda, approval of the minutes of September 14th, 2020.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a
Yes.
motion. Oh, go ahead. Hello?
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I got cut off for a second. Sorry about that. Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none on the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Second item on the agenda, town planners report.
Could you do a roll call, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Roll call vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney. He's not. Mr. Fratalia,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney. No, we're not hearing you. You're saying it, but you're not hearing you. Your microphone's off, Jay. You can't hear me anyways. No. I'd rather cure this now, ladies and gentlemen.
Can you hear me?
Now we
Yes.
can hear you, yes.
Okay.
On the motion, did you get that motion, Mr. Delaney?
Yes, I did.
Okay, you aye?
Aye.
All right, on the motion, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you. Motion carries 4-0. All right, next item on the agenda, town planners report. Mrs. McGinty.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. So I don't have anything in addition to add from my memo on the,
Okay.
the properties. Does the board have any questions for me?
Well, there are, Mrs. McGinty, there are a couple of things I wanted to run by for you, but it's nothing to do with what you said. Some things that were discussed today at a subsequent meeting, and I'd like to give you that information tomorrow so that you can follow up on it afterwards. It's not a voting matter, but it's just something that I'm sure you would like to follow up on. All right?
Sounds good.
I know that leaves it wide open, but that's all right.
One item I did want to provide an update on that's not listed on your memos is 1768 Main Street, about the property there, Blackett's property.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So I was able to speak to him on Friday afternoon, and he's gonna get the 2 signs installed by this Friday, this week.
Good.
So I'm gonna do a site visit on next Tuesday and confirm that they're all done. So I know you had asked about that last time, so.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. McGinty.
So I have a
Anything else?
question. I have a question, Ms. McGinty. So the issues on Main Street and Carter Street, are they resolved, or are we gonna discuss those later?
So Carter Street is resolved from what I saw in the site visit, for what the board requested. And then Main Street, are you referring to 1768?
Well, I was looking at 270 Main Street, Cumberland Farms, and then 85 Main Street, Burger King, and
So those aren't resolved yet, but on the memo, I just provided a status of like where they are at. So
Right.
okay.
so they're on my list to follow up with.
Thank you,
So-
Mrs. McGinty.
Great, thank you.
All set, Mr. Fratalia?
Yes, I am.
Very good. Next item on the agenda, 444 North America Road, approval not required plan. We have who's representing them?
This is George Medeiros. I'm an attorney in Billerica, Massachusetts. My office
Good
is
evening.
in- Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Good evening.
Go right ahead. You have the floor.
All right, for the record, my name is George Medeiros. I have offices at 574 Boston Road in Berwick, Massachusetts. What I have before the board is it's a little bit of an unusual situation where we have a lot of land that's partly in Billerica and partly in Tewksbury. There is a dwelling on the property right now that's partly, or part of the property, is partly in Billerica, also partly in Tewksbury. At the rear of the property, though, is an undeveloped, unbuildable lot, a non-buildable lot. We're going to be kind of splitting that non-buildable lot in two. We have actually a counter endorsement on the plan that was submitted to the board by the planning board of the town of Billerica. So once this approval is made, hopefully granted this board, we'll be taking that Mylar to a meeting with the planning board in Billerica. We did already obtain a variance from the Billerica Board of Appeals. What this board is looking for is where the property, the non-buildable lot is partly in Tewksbury. We're really trying to get a line basically from to the Tewksbury border. That's, I always assume that's all you're, I mean, I've never come across this situation exactly, where we're trying to go for a line from the Tewksbury line to the rear of the property. Continually dividing a non-buildable lot, which will remain non-buildable. The variance that was granted in Billerica is the building envelope is strictly not on this non-buildable lot, and it will be strictly in Billerica where the new dwelling would be located. The board of Billerica was very had endorsement on this plan or interest in this plan because there is a town cemetery that's in the like this is a U-shaped lot with the town cemeteries there. There has been dumping on the property because it's so separated from the house. And the grave markers over the years have all disappeared in that cemetery except for the tomb for Rogers tomb plaque. So the interest is to basically eventually have two separate lots. The house that's been there since 1949. There was a original. These separate lots are all shown on a plan. They existed I think 1980. And what we're just looking for that we don't feel that we need anything more than an endorsement of the plan so that we can take it to the planning board of the town of Billerica.
Is that it,
Yeah.
Mr. Medeiros?
What's that?
Is that it?
That's it, I guess.
All right. Board members, Mr. Fratalia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Medeiros, where have you been spoken to, 444 North Billerica Road? Are they aware of what's going on here?
People at 444 Boston Road? Yeah, I'm sorry.
North Billerica Road, is that what it is?
No. Even though the property is unusual, like I said, the property address for the house is 444 North Billerica Road, Tewksbury, but there's no frontage in Tewksbury. It's all the frontage is in Billerica on High Street. And even though it has a 444 Tewksbury address, it's actually the house is fronting onto High Street. I did submit with the plans that High Street is an accepted road in Billerica from up to the town Tewksbury town border, town line, and goes all the way to the other end of Hollis, 2 miles away. The applicants in this matter are the people that live at 444.
Okay. So they are aware of it. They know the line goes right through their property.
They've signed the petition. The Form A is signed by them.
Yeah. Okay, I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fratalia asked the question that I was looking for. I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney. Mr. Fratalia, would you call Mr. Delaney, please?
He's all set now. Jay?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Delaney. No, he's not. Mr. Fratalia.
I'll give him a call.
Thank you.
I think he's having microphone issues, Mr. Fowler.
I think you're right.
Hey, Jay, we can't hear you on the screen. I don't know what's up with your headset or something or whatever, but I see you talking, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I said I'm all set.
I'm glad you had all that conversation to tell us you were all set. Thank you, Mr. Delaney. And the chairman is all set also. We have Mrs. McGinty. Any questions from you on this?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
What's the pleasure of the board? I'm sorry?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to endorse the plan at 444 North River Road as described by Mr. Maderos.
Do we
Second.
have a second?
Second.
On the motion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Fattalia,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney. I know what he's saying. And the chair
He's
votes
saying
aye.
aye.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes. And the chair votes aye. Did you get that, Don?
Yep, all set.
Thank you very much.
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. Like I said, I do need to get the Marlite up to the planning board in Billerica. I don't know if that would be available.
Tomorrow?
Oh, okay, that's good.
You would think so. Mrs. McGinty, is that all right?
Yeah, it's the Mylar I was told is in our office, so it's available for you to sign when you're ready.
You only need the one signature, right?
Yes.
What time should I come there?
By 8:30.
Okay.
We'll be in.
I'll see you at 9 o'clock then.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't be over there tomorrow probably, but at least I know I'll try to get. I don't want to put that much time pressure on, but I think I'm on the 26th agenda in Billerica.
Yeah, so we'll let you know when it's all signed and ready for pickup tomorrow when it's signed.
All
With
right.
the transfer.
I thank the board. I thank the board. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I think you should probably say the phone number for people calling in. I don't know
yes,
if
you're
you-
right. You're absolutely right. I appreciate that. Before we go on, I only have a big block letter signed in front of me here. Please, per the new broadcasting procedure, the call-in number will no longer appear at the bottom of the screen. The number to call in is 978-771-0819. That is 978-771-0819. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, 1418 Main Street Special Permit Extension Request.
How you doing? My name is Chris Duggan.
Good evening.
I'm requesting extension for this project. We stopped the project due to the COVID.
Could you give us a little demonstration of what the project is? For public?
It's a 6-unit project, mixed use, and we just put it on hold because of the COVID stuff that was going on, and we just want to try and get that extended for 6 more months, or I guess we can extend it to 1 year after the pandemic is over.
Yeah, Mr. Dugan, I wasn't gonna give you a suggestion. This is my opinion only.
Yep.
Instead of asking for 6 months and all of a sudden we're still in the same situation 6 months from now, you're gonna have to come back to us.
Yep.
So if you ask for the 1 year after the COVID is lifted, you should be fine. Would you think that is proper?
Yes, I think we should go with that.
Okay, would you like that motion?
Yes, please.
You'll agree to do that then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Board members, Mr. Ryder?
Yes, I'm aware of the project. Obviously, we know we've had some issues with COVID, and I think this is proper at the time. Thank you.
Very, very good. Mr. Delaney?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Fattalia?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I had a couple of questions. So was it 6 units of housing and 1 commercial or?
6-unit, 1 commercial, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That was just for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Patalia. And the chair is all set. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
What's the
Second.
motion?
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the 1-year extension for 1418 Main Street.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor, say aye.
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Yes, Miss McGinty.
For the motion that was made, for the record, it didn't actually say a time frame. So it
One
needs to say like
year.
year and
1 year after the governor lifts the ban.
okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Yeah. Very good. All right, where were we? We have a motion that has been made and seconded. Mr. Ryder?
Yes.
Mr. Fratalia?
Aye.
Mr. Delaney?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Dugan.
Thank you
Good
very
luck.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome.
Bye.
Next item on the agenda. 935 Main Street, concept plan review. Mr. Saccone, how are you?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have Andy Street is present tonight to make a presentation to you guys and answer any technical questions that you may have.
Very good. Mr. Street, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You as well. Again, just for the record, my name is Andy Street, Civil Design Consultants. I am trying to get my screen shared here. So this parcel is 935 Main Street, tax map 47, lot 69. This is the site of the former Tewksbury Police Station. It's about 6.6 acres or so total in size, which the majority of the western side is wetlands, and there's some floodplain there as well. The zone, it's kind of split. There's a zone line towards the top of the very top of the parcel, furthest from Main Street, that divides the Residence 40 district from the commercial zone. The commercial zone being in the front of the parcel, which is the largest piece. Frontage along Main Street is right now. There's some curb cuts and pavement and things like that for access, and the site is really largely disturbed right now. The proposal that is before you tonight is to consolidate the curb cuts to provide one curb cut for access off of Main Street, and that access drive will serve 18 townhome units. Each of those townhomes will have parking. It's all in front of the units. There's no, a lot of these townhome developments have had parking on one unit inside the, one parking space inside the unit, but this is all outside. Parking is along the driveway entrance. As it's in the town center overlay district, this is needs to be considered a mixed-use development. In order to meet that threshold, we're proposing to provide 20 20 parking spaces for use of the Tewksbury Housing Authority, which is the parcel to the top of the page there, really to the south of this piece. As it says in the zoning, the parking facility is a commercial use. So the intent here is to do 18 townhomes in a duplex fashion, 9 duplexes, 18 total townhomes, and then 20 parking spaces for the housing authority, exclusively for the housing authority. The total parking count is there's 46 spaces provided. The layout as it's shown does provide access to the fire department, which, you know, should this move forward, we'd certainly provide the necessary plans, turn movements, and things of that nature. We are asking for 2 waivers. We'll need a special permit and a site plan special permit, and this layout shows 2 waivers, neither of which are necessarily required, but I think it makes it a better layout for what you see here. The first waiver is to allow the 20 spaces at the top of the sheet there along the Tewksbury Housing Authority property being closer than 10 feet to that rear lot line. 10 feet, I'm sorry, closer than 10 feet from that lot line. And the second would be to allow a reduction in parking spaces. So the zoning bylaw requires 3 spaces per unit when they're duplexes and only 2 spaces per unit when it's a multifamily. We have 46 spaces when we would need 54. But the 46 provides 2 per unit, and then there's some left over that could be used for guest parking. We could move that parking for the housing authority 10 feet away from that rear property line and still make this layout work in some fashion. And we could also add additional parking to that 20 spaces to provide the 54 spots. But I think this is a better layout here, and we still provide the 2 spaces per unit as is typical with these multifamily type dwellings developments. We'll also need order conditions from the Conservation Commission and then a highway access permit as well for the curb cut off of Main Street. In addition to this meeting, I believe we're on the agenda for the October 20th IDR meeting. So we continue discussion there with various town departments. I think one other thing worth noting is that there is a sewer easement that comes along the property. I'm not sure if my mouse shows up, but there's a sewer easement and a sewer pipe here that kind of follows along Main Street and actually goes through 3 of the units on the left-hand side of the driveway. And as part of this project, once we get further along in the design, we figure out a way to locate that sewer and have it reconnect and properly serve the needs of the town and the units and houses that use that sewer currently today. I think with that, certainly happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Very good, Mr. Street. Thank you for the your information. Mr. Ryder.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit concerned on the commercial component of parking spaces meeting the commercial component of this. I just feel that that's a stretch on the intent of the commercial component to be 20 parking spaces.
Yeah, well, I can certainly understand. I mean, as I mentioned, it's listed as a commercial use in the zoning there, and I believe Mike could probably speak more to this, but I believe those spaces are actually part of the purchase agreement that came with the town. So we're trying to do something to meet the threshold, but also provide a benefit to the town as well and the housing authority.
That is correct, Andy.
Mr. Ryder.
And no, I understand those spaces are part of that, but the intent of allowing the commercial component was to have a commercial parcel, a commercial component that was part of this, and I think it's stretching the intent of that as being, as you stated, that's part of the purchase to have those parking spaces due to the fact that it is commercial. I think it's really dancing around the component of it.
May I?
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ryder, first of all, I think, as you stated, we're aware that part of the RFP was to give 20 spaces to the Tewksbury Housing Authority. And further to that, as far as the commercial use, the Tewksbury zoning bylaws clearly state that parking is a commercial use.
I understand that it is allowed, but the intent is we want to bring commercial components to Main Street, and just my opinion here. I feel that this would be this parcel would be in the location with what's happening with the town center and the potential future of town center. I think this would be having a commercial component here would be a value add to it.
I can appreciate your opinion, Mr. Ryder. If I may, Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Go right ahead.
I appreciate your opinion, Mr. Ryder. And as you know, I both live and work in the town of Tewksbury, and I ride Route 38 Main Street every day of my life. And as far as I can see, it would be my opinion that some of the commercial uses on Main Street are not very appealing. And I think that we are a little overbuilt on the commercial side right now. A lot of buildings for lease. I see a lot of buildings that really don't present well to the people that live in the town of Tewksbury. So I thought that as it was part of, we all know it was part of the RFP, that these spaces are critical to the Tewksbury Housing Authority. And I believe, it's my opinion, that this is the best use of this property. I know the town center, I've had discussions with planners and people in the town about the town center and how it will advance and how quickly that will happen. And I think, you know, for the long-term plan, I think that the town has a really good plan put together, but I think that we're looking 10 or 15 years down the road before it comes to fruition. And in my opinion, this is a very good use for that parcel that's sat dormant for so long. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Ciccone. Mr. Ryder, you all set?
I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Mr. Fratalia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also echo Mr. Ryder's concern about the parking in the back. Like Mr. Street said earlier, the parking is the commercial use. Well, Tewksbury Housing Authority is not a commercial establishment. It's a town entity, not a commercial establishment. When I think of a commercial establishment, I think of a rental or a fee charged for the parking. It seems to me that was part of the agreement back when it was purchased, right, Mr. Ciccone? The arrangement for the parking spots for Tewksbury Housing. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was part of the RFP. Absolutely.
Okay.
And there is a fee. There's a cost to me to provide that parking, to plow that parking, to maintain that parking. There is a fee.
Yeah, but I mean the commercial fee as far as people that occupy those parking spots are paying a fee for use or for parking there. So I'm curious about setting a precedent here as well for some other unit on other building or development coming in and wanting to do the same thing that we agree here to. When I'm not happy with it, to tell you the truth. So but I know the Tewksbury Housing Authority can use the parking, and I agree. But it's just like you said, Mr. Ryder said, we're skirting the intent here of the overlay district in its design. So another question I have, Mr. Ciccone, is: are the units going to be for sale or rent?
Rent.
Rental. So they're all 18 rentals.
Yes, and 2 affordable.
Okay, that was my next
2
question.
affordable for the town of Tewksbury, and the town of Tewksbury will get the credits for the others as well.
So we'll get credit for all of 18?
I believe that is the case. That would, your planning department would confirm that for you, but that's what I've been told.
Okay.
And on the commercial use, I understand your opinion and I respect your opinion, but the zoning bylaws are clear.
I know it's clear saying parking is a commercial entity in this development, but like I said, I don't think Tewksbury Housing Authority is a commercial establishment or development or concern. But with that, I'll close, Mr. Chairman. I'll wait for new plans coming forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fratalia. Just, if I may, before we get to Mr. Delaney, this plan to when the police station was there, police station was on land used by the town that was state land for the police station. When that ceased to be state land, it was reverting back to the state. Having said that, it was always the understanding that when someone used this parcel to for something other than vacant land or a police station, it would allow the housing authority to have, I couldn't remember the number of parking spaces, but it would give the housing authority the ability to have another entrance to their property instead of off of Summer Street, totally off Summer Street. This would allow them to have a loop and not have all the crowded parking areas that they have inside that site. This will allow them to spread out, and actually, someone asked me if they were going to put the parking spaces out front, and I said, I hope not, because it's not to be looking like a parking lot, but it's to look like housing. And then the people in the back could get in from their housing, get in their car and drive through out to Main Street. So this was not something that just came up in the last 5 or 6 years. This has been there for ever since the police station was built. So having said that, as Mr. Fratalia said, we'll wait for the plans to come back for fruition after the IDR. Mr. Delaney.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead.
I'm concerned because the thing is, in the original purchase of this property, the 20 spaces, which we know were supposed to be given to the housing authority with an entrance from the housing authority, because it was going to be used by, well, let's put it this way, doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs, visitors or whatever, because it's very difficult in Carnation Drive for the parking. Now, how are we using these parking spaces as a commercial entity is beyond me. This was been part of the agreement. It's been part of the agreement for a long time. If somebody can explain to me how this is commercial, I'd like to hear it. I guess I'm missing something in the conversation.
Mr. Delaney, one thing that was obviously, if you look at the plan, there was no way you could access the Carnation Drive into this parking area via Carnation Drive without walking to the parking spaces and then driving out to Main Street. So you could not be a driveway or a road or whatever on Carnation property, Carnation land. So
isn't there a walkway there now?
There is. You couldn't drive, I said.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there is a walkway. Right. Yes, there is.
But how does 20 parking spaces that are supposed to be given to the housing authority become a commercial property? I guess is my question.
Well, that's not for me to answer. I'm just telling you the history of it. That's all.
You know, I have a pretty good idea of the history and what has taken place there. But I still, housing authority was involved in the original dealing of this thing, and they were guaranteed 20 spaces with the sale of this property. Now, I want to know how that becomes a commercial entity for the development that they're trying to put in. You know, they're going with commercial and residential. How does 20 parking spaces that were supposed to be given to the housing authority become a commercial entity?
May I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Go right ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Hello, Mr. Delaney. Again, it's Mike Ciccone. I'm not an attorney, but I do know that the zoning bylaws call it a commercial use, not a commercial entity. There doesn't have to be a commercial entity established. There has to be a commercial use on the property. And again, I would state that the Tewksbury zoning bylaws state that parking is a commercial use.
Thank you.
Obviously, that's something new to me, but if that's the way it is, I guess that's the way it is. I really, as long as the housing authority at this particular point gets to 20 parking spaces, I guess I'm okay with it.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak one more time, please?
Absolutely.
Mr. Delaney, I'd like you to know that, I've worked very closely with the housing authority. We tried to make this all senior housing. We were unsuccessful. I had several meetings. I brought engineers with me. I brought attorneys with me. Directly with the housing, and the town manager's office was also involved. We've been working on this for several years. And at the end of the day, this is our only option. I mean, it's not our only option. I shouldn't say it that way. This is the option that we've come up with at the end of the day. We have a residential use and a commercial use in the central business district. And this is where we are. But this isn't something that was hatched, in the last 2 weeks. We've been working on this for 2 years.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Saccone. Mr.
Welcome.
Street, do you have anything else?
No, I don't think so. I was gonna jump in with that same comment about the overlay district and that definition of commercial there, which calls out the parking facility.
Very good.
No, I think
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Ryder.
I understand what they're stating is the zoning allows for that, but it's interesting that the PNF or the agreement has that built into the agreement that they're required to provide parking. So that is part of the agreement. So how is that turned around being allowed as a commercial component? One is already tied to the parcel. The agreement was tied to the parcel to allow the parking. Now the overlay district the intent of it is to have commercial, but also allow residential property there. And it seems like it's getting very fuzzy here. The intent of the overlay was to bring in commercial components and to allow residential components with that within the overlay district. And you've seen that on other components as you move down Main Street. And I understand that parking is considered a commercial component, but parking for a commercial component would be a business. That is the intent of the intent of the zoning. And I think this is where this is already an agreement to have this as parking that went along with, no matter what went here, there was going to be parking for the housing. So I have a feeling we're going down a road that if this happens, the next open lot on Main Street within the district is going to be the same exact thing. I think I think this needs to be looked at very closely.
Mr. Ryder, I could understand your thoughts, but I don't know of any other lots on Main Street that would have the history of this lot and what it was supposed to be used for once it was not a police station. That's what was written 40 years ago. Once it was not a police station, it would revert back to the town. So I guess the argument is with us.
No, absolutely. I understand that I'm not, that there's a long history with the parcel, but the ultimate RFP that went out included that a component of whatever development was to go into this site had to have parking for the housing authority, so that's built into that. And then we're looking at saying, well, because the RFP had a commercial component, and that can, i.e. parking, so let's use that as our commercial component, and then we build residential housing there. It doesn't work. And I understand there's history to it, but this goes back to the town now owned the parcel. They put it out as an RFP. Whatever development went into this parcel, there was parking required for the housing. That is there no matter what went there. If it was a coffee shop, a Burger King, or an ice cream stand. But that's separate from what should be on the parcel, and the zoning overlay district requires a commercial component. And that's already built in. So I don't think you can take credit for both components there. That's it, and that's just my opinion. I think it's something that we need to look at, and we'll have to discuss it. And I'm going to discuss it with Mr. Sadwick and see if that's going to meet the intent.
Are you done, Mr. Ryder? Yes, he is. Board members, anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Delaney.
the parking spaces no matter, like Mr. Ryder has been saying, the parking spaces were going to be there no matter what the property entailed. That was part of the arrangement when the property was sold. It's been part of the arrangement for a long, long time. Now, like Mr. Ryder and myself are saying, how does that become, because those parking spaces are designated for the housing authority, how does this become a commercial entity? I just don't see it. But if the laws or the rules that I'm missing here say that that's the way it is, I guess so be it. But I have a hard time believing it. So I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome. Not a hearing, not a motion, not necessary. Mr. Street, we'll see you when you come back.
That sounds good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of the board. Thank you.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to the hearings,
Yes.
I believe we skipped over the committee reports.
I think you're right.
Okay. Just wanted to-
Before, yeah, the first item under item B, committee reports, administrative actions. Any committees to report?
Not at the moment, Mr. Chair.
No, all set, Mr. Chairman, on my end.
All set. Mrs. McGinty, any administrative actions?
Nope, I don't have anything to report.
Okay, very good. Moving right along. Mr. Dorrington, could you let, he can hear us anyways. We start the discussion on 181 Pine Street.
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And just for the rest of the board, I want to thank Mr. Ryder for what he did in putting together the conversation that was had with the various members of the town on Friday. Having said that, it's been a long process. Hopefully, it can come to fruition at some time, and we can move ahead with whatever we want to do with this plan. I would hope that everybody understands that the discussion that was had on Main Street, on Friday, on Pine Street, was, in a sense, a private conversation. There was no records kept, I don't think, were there?
No, there were not.
Okay.
No,
So,
Mr. If I may,
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to speak of that. Thank you. After last meeting, I know there was some communication problems and so forth. So at the time, I said to the board that I would schedule a visit to meet the residents out there and get their, understand their concerns, questions. So we did do that. No minutes were taken. Obviously, there was only one planning board member there. So I think we'll have a clear communication for Mr. Hopkinson to be able to call in, and then the rest of the board can hear his concerns, and then we can go through the rest of the packet.
very good, thank you. How we're going to do this is, Mr. Hammer, you're going to give your presentation based on the information that you heard Friday, what you have come up with via a plan. And then once you submit that, we're going to let the homeowner have 5 minutes to give his thoughts about this, and then it would be back to the board. Everybody all set? Mr. Hammer, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Fowler and members of the board. For the record, my name is Matt Hammer with Landplex Engineering and Surveying. I'm also here with me this evening in my office is Mr. James Andella as well. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. The plan So since the last meeting, you know, essentially the plans haven't changed. We provided some additional information to Mr. Hardiman in the way of stormwater calculations to show that the need for easements wouldn't be needed for the grading, because the original grading plan had some low spots that we were taking credit for with the stormwater calculations. We included the stormwater report to Mr. Hardiman. We additionally provided an additional turning radius on the auto turn to the town. I just wanted to make it clear to the board that that turning radius was previously submitted for the fire truck to exit the site. So what we did was we also resubmitted that same document. Essentially, we've provided a notation on the plan as well per Mr. Hardiman's recommendations, and just provided a cover letter back saying that you know, conditions could be provided on some of the housekeeping items that were not on the last plan. And then Mr. Plunkett provided a narrative back to the issue with the waivers, which Mr. Plunkett can chime in as well, and also an updated homeowners association document.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump in at this moment for a clarification of the process that's going to take place here tonight.
Go ahead,
The
Mr.
announcement
Plunkett.
that with the indication that there were only 4 members present, it's always been the protocol of the board to allow a continuance. Our expectation here tonight was to come before the board, not for any real substantive discussion, but more a matter that at the last meeting, the expectation or the thought was that we were going to get input relative to this meeting from Mr. Hopkinson, so that we would have the ability to know what issues are brought up and be able to discuss and address the issues. But we haven't heard anything. We were given notice that Mr. Ryder did meet with Mr. Hopkinson and would have a report available tonight. Our thoughts were that we would have the ability to hear what happened at this meeting on Friday, and then not have substantive discussion, but then continue this matter when we have a full complement of the board at the next meeting. That was the expectation tonight, that we would have that we would request to get the information so that we would be able to address it at the next meeting, and then have a continuance of this meeting so that we would have the full complement of the board at the next meeting.
Very good, Mr. Plunkett. That's our understanding also. I just wanted to hear it from you so that we knew we were both on the same page.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Does any board member have anything they'd like to put in for information that was observed or heard on Friday last?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, Mr. Ryder.
Thank you. So as stated, I met out on site with a homeowner. I also was there with Kevin Hardiman and Mr. Sidewalk. And I listened to the concerns of the residents. And I'll admit they were the concerns that I've voiced from day one on this project that have still yet to be addressed. And we can, if we don't want to get into a substantive discussion on this, but I think it needs to be, because my concerns have yet to been addressed on this project going back to the first meeting on this. From a standpoint of the residence parcel will flood if there is an event like that happens in every spring out there as Mr. Hopkinson shown, illustrated in pictures. Looking at the plans that were submitted, the parcel, Mr. Hopkinson parcel is roughly at 130, his back corner of his parcel. The proposed dwelling, I believe that's lot 1, first house on the left when you come into the cul-de-sac that is abutting Mr. Hopkinson's property. We can start with that. We discussed this at length, that the proposed property is higher than Mr. Hopkinson property. Anyone that understands how water flows, it is going to flow downhill. So that's pretty straightforward. That has yet to been discussed, that Mr. Hopkinson property is in fact lower than the proposed parcel. Then we have the rain garden. That was another concern, that it is at the outside bank of that is Mr. Hopkinson property is lower than that, or if not level at 130. So the answer to that was to put in a wick drain. A wick drain is not going to work in this location. A wick drain is, there's a maintenance aspect to that. They clog, and this becomes a responsibility of the town that will ultimately own this project of the roadway if there's an issue along with that retention pond. So, pretty, I don't want to continue to go beat this to death, but the water is going to pool in Mr. Hopkinson's property. As Mr. Hardiman stated back a while ago, we discussed this. To get this to work with all of the drainage calculations, this has to be precise. And it's going to change in the field. And this, in my opinion, this is going to cause a significant liability for the town. There has never been a guarantee given to Mr. Hopkinson that his property will not flood. This has been brought up at numerous occasions. The applicant has stated that they cannot guarantee that. I think there has to be a guarantee based upon the plans that are indicated here. There has to be a guarantee that that parcel will not flood, and that cannot be given. Just from my standpoint, it's just not going to work here. So that was basically, ultimately, what came from. We had a site. We walked the parcel. He showed us the area, what floods in the springtime. Mr. Hopkinson wanted to be heard. It was very difficult for him with the communications, but I think hopefully tonight that they set up, Brian set up for him to be heard clearly, and that we can hear him clearly. But that was my understanding coming out of the meeting with him on Friday. But I also have some other concerns, but I would like to let Mr. Hopkins, through you, Mr. Chairman, express his concerns, and then I can obviously voice my other concerns. Pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
Mr. Chairman, again, relative to the protocol that's being followed here tonight.
Right.
The expectation is that we are going to address this before a full complement of the board when all members are present, hopefully at the next meeting.
I don't disagree with that.
The situation is, I would suggest that we're looking for the report from Mr. Ryder as to what was discussed, what are the points we're supposed to address relative to that meeting. And one question here, just for clarification, I'm not sure if it's resident singular or residents plural in terms of who was at the meeting. I understand Mr. Ryder, Mr. Sadrick, Mr. Hopkinson. Were there other residents there also?
Yes, it was his wife was there, but through you, Mr. Chairman, some of these concerns that we talk about being addressed, I have addressed these from day one, and have yet to get the answer on these. I've asked on these on numerous occasions every time this has been brought up on the drainage, and it is not to be answered. I'm looking for, and pardon me, the answer was to put in a wick drain for this property. A wick drain is not going to handle the amount of water that is in that area that floods every spring. And I think it's our obligation to make sure that this is not putting a burden on the resident or the abutter. And that is going to happen. The developer is going to be gone from this parcel, and this is going to be a liability on the town. And I don't think that this board should, if we're not getting the answers, the drainage is going to be a concern there. And we're not getting the answers that we need to make an informed decision, whether it be tonight, whether it be next meeting when we have a full complement of the board. My decision, me personally, my decision is not going to be changed whether we have a full complement of the board or not. The decision has been we have not got the answers from day one. And the answer was to put in a wick drain. A wick drain is not going to work.
Mr. Ryder, you all set?
Mr. Chairman, we
Mr. Plunkett, Mr. Plunkett.
Yes,
Mr. Plunkett.
I'm sorry.
One second.
Sure, sorry.
This is how I think we should do this. You're representing the petitioner.
Yeah.
Mr. Hammer is the engineer representing the petitioner. He was at the meeting. I want him to state for the fact, for the record, some of the items that were discussed and what his thoughts were. I was a little taken back when he said the plans that submitted haven't changed from the beginning. If that's what he's saying, I'm a little disappointed in that based on what information he supposedly heard.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Fowler.
I did make a clarification.
I
did make a clarification. I said what had changed on this was the outlet as well as we put in a wick drain. That was the answer to the problem. A wick drain is not going to work here. And that, thank you.
So, Mr. Fowler,
Go right ahead.
we have changed the plans on many occasions. We're on revision 5 addressing comments from the town engineer and additional concerns from the board. I can say, Mr. Ryder, we have made mitigation measures that you additionally requested in terms of deepening the swale on lot 1 that you requested. So we went and changed that to the plan prior to the last meeting. We have changed the drainage system itself to change the drainage from a conventional, a rain garden configuration to a catch basin to drain manhole 4-bay detention basin system. So that's been a major change in the plan to address the drainage. And I can say that there's a low point in the back of Mr. Hopkinson's lot. We're going to be a significant decrease in the water that's currently going there and impounding as we've seen in the spring. So that condition on Mr. Hopkinson's property, that low point being in his rear corner, I can't change unless I go and regrade his lot. What we did as a wick drain was not to solve Mr. Hopkinson's problem, but to add an additional measure to help with his problem on his property at his rear corner. This development is going to mitigate the flow that was currently flowing there and is going to be treating that water and providing a reduction to that condition. So that's going to be a benefit to his property by this drainage configuration. And in terms of the guarantee issue that keeps coming up that was also provided to us by Mr. Hopkinson, as you know, Mr. Ryder, we need to maintain drainage systems. And in all drainage systems, they all need to be maintained, whether it's the gutters on your house or the drainage system in this project. But I can say that with the homeowners association, that is going to be maintaining that wick drain and also maintaining the detention basin itself, that there's a mechanism in place in order for that system to be maintained properly. So that in itself is a guarantee by virtue of the homeowners association and from our design work. And we're in no way trying to not give answers to questions that you have. At the last meeting, in fact, and Kevin Hardiman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Kevin Hardiman had said that this project is not going to have an impact on Mr. Hopkinson's property. And we've been doing everything we can to provide a drainage system that's going to function so that it's not further impacting his property. I can't change the fact that he has a low point in his back corner that was there and it was being impounded with groundwater 2 to 3 feet below that water elevation. There's a thick layer of leaves. We did a test pit where that low spot was, and we know that we have sand and gravels underneath that low spot. And what we did was when we did a test pit and realized that groundwater is a few feet underneath that low spot, that the water with the wick drain is just going to help that situation. And it's a situation that happened when the water is sitting on top of those leaves. And we know that because when the water was sitting on top of the leaves, when we did a test pit, the groundwater was 2 to 3 feet below that point. And that's why we just added the additional wick drain to just help with that situation. Will that happen again? Will there be a low spot with water there? Yes, I suspect there will. That's his property. If he chooses to leave the leaves there and to have that low spot, then that still will be the case. But we're not going to increase or worsen that situation.
All said, Mr. Hammer?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer. Mr. Hardiman, you here with us?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening. Is there anything based on the meeting? Nice to see you there, sir. Is there anything that you would like to add based on your observations, the discussions, what Mr. Hammer has talked to us about, and your feelings about this as a person that is here for the benefit of the town?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do want to thank Mr. Ryder for taking the time to meet us out there on last Friday, and the Hopkinsons as well, and Mr. Sadwick. So I have received the revised drainage calculations from the applicant. We're continuing to go through those. I will say that, the more we review this, there seems to be some missing information in the area of the shared lot line between the Hopkinsons and the applicant's project. We've all discussed this low point that holds water. We did do a test pit out there. I was there for that. Groundwater elevation is about 24 inches below ground. And when the applicant does talk about putting the wick drain in, which with groundwater that high, that close to the ground surface, it's going to be difficult to get water into the ground. But one of the key things I think that's missing is topography adjacent to the project to really understand what the standing water situation is out there. Mr. Hopkinson was nice enough to provide a photograph of the area that floods. And I understand that, there's no trespassing signs out there and things like that. But additional topography in the area, I think, would really paint a good picture as to what the impacts are going to be with this project. The applicant's proposing to put, about 4 feet of fill into that low spot, which is going to shift where that water sits. Water naturally falls into that low area now, and without knowing what the topography is onto the Hopkinson's land, it's unknown what the impacts ultimately will be if that low spot is filled in and where that water is going to shift to. because that water isn't going to disappear in the spring. It's still going to collect, and it's going to want to collect in a low spot. Without that information, it's very difficult to know the full picture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hardeman. I'm not done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I am going to personally ask Mr. Hopkinson if, in fact, he will allow, I don't know, I don't think the town would go out there and do it, but an engineer for Mr. Hammer to go out there to get some good sites, good lines, elevations, and then maybe then we could have something we could hang our hat on, or they, Mr. Hammer et al., could hang their hat on, and to show Mr. Hopkinson what could happen if we do this. But that's fine. Mr. Hardeman, anything else from you at this time?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Kevin. All right, board members, anything else without being redundant? Anything else that you might want to add based on the information that you have heard tonight? Hearing none. Mr. Plunkett, do you have anything? You need a microphone.
There we go.
There
I'm
there
sorry.
you go.
Thank you for the information, and we would be requesting that we continue to the next meeting with the full complement of the board present.
Sure, I understand that. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we're going to allow Mr. Hopkinson to come on. Brian, if you would do so, and just tell him well, I've already said the restrictions, and we will go from there. Mr. Hopkinson, good evening.
Yes. Hi, good evening. Well, the developer keeps on talking about the flood area, that the leaves held everything in, 2 feet below that with drainage. That flood area has been there for hundreds of years, and the leaves on my property may have some reason to hold it in, but that's natural. That's what the deer came to and everything else. So he keeps saying that drainage from my property is my problem. My drainage from my property went into that flood area, and I had no problems. I mean, but it is what it is. It drained out there. So when the developer thinks he's doing me a favor by providing Wick Drain and all that stuff, that because of me, I have no problem with the water going over to the flood area. They're blocking it up by putting a cul-de-sac there, so essentially damming up my property, basically at the edge of my property. And they mentioned about the leaves that blocked all the water and had the flood area be that way for hundreds of years. Well, those same leaves are going to be falling on the Wick Drain, which is what, 1.5 by 1.5 foot. I don't even know what the Wick Drain looks like. I asked for it, but I've never seen it. So that area is going to be clogged up quite regularly, and the water there is just going to be backing up into my land, because my land is basically set the same. I'm using the developer's plans. My property line, my property elevation is set at the same elevation as the catch basin for the Wick Drain. So once it forms above the Wick Drain, it's definitely going to be onto my property, and that's illegal. So that's a concern for mine. The backup is going to be ponding. Wintertime, we got the snow removal up on the cul-de-sac coming down on top of the Wick Drain. You've got freezing and thawing. You get a springtime that has rain on top of the snow. I'm going to have a pond there. There's just no getting around it. Then you have the, I'll call it the rain garden. I know it's been changed, but for my purposes, I just call it the rain garden. The first meeting that we had, the developer agreed that the water is going to spill over to my land. And that again, points of discharges to other property prohibited. That's 5.3.20 on the subdivision rules and regulations. So If it's going to dump on my property, it can't be. It's prohibited. Coming back from the rain garden, the water coming from the Wick garden, the Wick Drain is going to come onto my property. That's illegal. You can't do that. So that's my main concern. Now the board, I think last week was pretty hard to understand anything here. If you know I think the chairman and Mr. Delaney agreed that if I didn't like their decision, I should get a lawyer. Well, that is the thing. Discharging water onto my property, it's not their decision to make. The law is clear that you cannot do this. You know, so again, I don't know where the board's coming from. I don't know if they had a separate meeting for this above the public meeting to arrive at that conclusion or not. But I don't recall them having a meeting on that subject for that reason. Again, the first meeting is the only time I recall that the board discussed it at any length. And at that meeting, like I said, the developer said that the water's going to come over to my land. So, you know, I mean, I understand through this, next week you're going to have, next time you meet, you're going to have another solution. I hope so.
Another what?
Kind of good. You're going to have a solution for this.
A solution? I can't guarantee that. The solution
you
is.
Can't do it. Yeah, but if you can't guarantee it, you can't
Mr.
do
Hopkinson, Mr. Hopkins, you asked me a question. You asked a question. I'm going to give you an answer. We can't give you a solution. It's up to the engineers for the developer. They give us a solution for you and us.
Okay.
All right. If you would give me a minute.
I'm sorry. I thought you were the engineer. That's what. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No. 1 second, Mr. Hammer. I'll get back to you in a second. I have Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Hardiman. I have a question to ask you beyond the drainage issue in Mr. Hopkinson's lot. Is the town, are you there with me?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Hardiman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gilbert. I see Mr. Gilbert's name over here. I don't want to not speak to him if he's here. My question is, beyond the discussion of the wetland problem on Mr. Hopkinson's lot, is there still a problem in your eyes, the town's eyes, for the sidewalks on Pine Street and Whipple Road and the entrance to the new street? Is that still a problematic thing that has not been solved to your liking yet?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, this is Kevin Hardiman.
Yes.
So as far as the sidewalks are concerned, I understand the applicant's asking for a waiver. And my comment was that, the waiver should include what is required under the subdivision regulations,
Right.
which is not just the new road, but also the roadways along which the project has frontage. So we'd ask that be included as part of, if it's going to be a fee in lieu of construction, that distance also be included.
Okay.
As far as the entrance off of Pine Street, they still have not provided the information we've asked for. And we still feel that there's some significant safety issues that will be created by the geometry in which they have designed the road to. As the board knows, they're asking for a waiver of the curb radius from 25 feet, which is required in the subdivision regs and is also mirrored in the fire code for access roads, because that is what is commonly accepted as the necessary radius at the junction of roadways to safely allow vehicles to get from one roadway to the other through turning movements. We've asked numerous times for turning radius for a single unit truck, which would be your Amazon Prime deliveries or your trash trucks, things of that nature. and we have yet to receive those to understand, what the impacts of the geometry is on those. In addition, they're asking for a reduction in the radius on one side from 25 feet down to 5 feet. And one thing that we noticed today in reviewing the plans, and I talked to Mr. Gilbert about it, is it appears that the 15-foot radius on the westerly side of the proposed roadway is not tangent to Pine Street. And it looks like that was done in order to make sure the curb radius doesn't extend beyond the frontage line of the property. So that was one thing that I was going to comment on in the upcoming review letter to make sure that the applicant fixes that. So
Okay.
I guess in short, there are still significant issues with the entrance, site distance, and geometry issues.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hardiman. I appreciate the candor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To the board members, obviously, we're not looking at, when we're looking at this whole plan for the whole project, there's a lot to be done here before this board can even consider a vote. When we're going to get a letter from the DPW relative to safety out on the intersection of Pine and the new road, the sidewalks, and how they're going to handle that situation, plus the big issue, which is to Mr. Hopkinson, is the water that has ponded on his property, and he doesn't want it to add to that. I believe that would be the proper way of saying it, not to flood his lot, but to add to his flooding. So having said that, I would ask Mr. Hammer. Mr. Hammer, we have, and I'm not done with anybody else that might want to speak. Mr. Hammer, we have.
would like to speak.
What's that?
Hopkinson would like to speak again.
Who wants to speak?
Hopkinson.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'm still have the floor. I'm asking questions so I can see where we are.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hammer, we have 3 weeks within which we will address this again. That is the 26th of October. Quick. It's going to be very quick.
Yeah, hi, Mr.
I would expect and anticipate that you could come to fruition the answers to Mr. Hardiman's questions about the easy ones, the sidewalk.
We already did.
Second one is the entrance. That's not so easy. And third is the wet issue on the intersection of the subdivision and Mr. Hawkinson's lot. So without this board being forced into a positive or negative vote without all the information, I would agree we don't have all the information. So it's for a small lot, but it's a tight lot. So I would expect you, hopefully, that you can get this information complete to us. And now, Mr. Hopkinson, you have about a minute and a half.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to make this fast. You mentioned about the flooding concerning. I am concerned about that, and you're addressing that. Also, the developers is the spillage from the rain garden. I'll call it the rain garden, but the spillage going over to my property. That inevitably going to happen with blockage and whatever, freezing authority and whatever. But the rain garden spillage under the property, it's got 133 feet now. And if it spills up by the Pine Street, it's going to stay up there and won't drain back to where the Wick Drain is. The developers, engineers have said that in the past. The other thing is landscaping. Nobody's addressed that. I talked to Anna McGinty, and she said that the board decided that they didn't need a landscape plans. Well, that leaves my northern and easterly border vacant. I don't know what's going to happen there. We've got a swale that has to be maintained by somebody on my northerly border, I don't know how that's going to be addressed for camouflage or fencing or whatever. I don't even know when that was brought up in any meeting. Also, to the lighting, at the first meeting, that was going to be all taken care of. All those headlights are going to be elevated above my property and probably come right into my house. And that was no problem for the developer. They're going to maintain and correct all that stuff, so don't worry about it. But I haven't seen anything. And now that the board doesn't want a landscape plan, that's, dismissing 9.7 of the subdivision rules and regulations, I would be concerned to find out what is going to happen. And I would think the board would want it too.
Mr. Hopkinson,
Yes.
I don't recall this board ever saying there was not going to be a landscape plan, because that would always be part and parcel of a site, whether it's a berm to shield lights, or a berm to be part of an area so as in fact not allow water to sheet flow from one lot to the next. There's a lot of reasons for landscaping, and it's not just aesthetics.
I know.
So
I agree.
that's not a dead issue.
Okay, then I was misinformed. I misread. I thought Anna McGinty had a direct line to you. Okay, good. So there'll be a landscape plan. I'm all for it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Hammer, you heard that? Yes, Mr. Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. I did want to just make a couple observations. We did meet with Mr. Hopkinson, and one of the concerns from the planning board early on, and I think that was also a concern of the town engineer, was that at one point we had an emergency overflow out of the basin that was adjacent to Mr. Hopkinson's property. I just wanted to let everyone know that we took that emergency overflow out from the basin, and that was something that we listened to Mr. Hopkinson's concern with that, and we took that off the plan on the drainage configuration. There is and maybe Mr. Hopkins, I don't know what the landscaping is that's being requested, but we do have some proposed trees on our subdivision road layout that was requested by Ms. McGinty. And it's normal that we would put in some street trees throughout the project, which we're happy to do. And that's on sheet 4 of 7.
Right.
And we've never said that there wouldn't be headlights, and it's not going to be a problem. We realize that with roadways, there are going to be headlights. But what I can say is that it's going to be minimal. We're a small development. We have no problem putting up some additional landscaping if need be to help mitigate some of that at strategic locations that we might be able to do so. And then additionally, Mr. Hopkinson, is it okay if we come on your property to obtain some additional topographic information? That's a question to Mr. Hopkinson, Mr. Fowler.
That's to Mr. Hopkinson.
First blush, I'd say probably not if I'm there with them. I was wondering if they could hire my engineer to do it.
Well, that's not up to the planning board to do. That's between.
Well, I'm talking to you, to him.
I understand that, but
Okay.
I just want to make it.
The other thing, while I have the attention, the overflow is taking out. I think we said at 132. That's fine. But in doing so, the overflow now is the top part of the, I'll call it the rain garden, which is like 140 feet or so of length, which extends from the cul-de-sac all the way to Pine Street. Now, should that overflow near Pine Street, there's going to be a ponding situation there that's uncontrollable. So eliminating the spillway doesn't eliminate the problem. It just elevates the spillway up to, I think, elevation 133. So I would like that addressed, that again, will spill on my property, which is illegal. And I think that's wrong.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hopkinson. I have one question for you. Do you have, you said your engineer. Is this someone that could come before with you and give you, instead of you giving us his opinion, him giving his opinion of what's going to happen on your property?
He could, but I thought it was just, you need some grades. So once the grades are there, anyone can determine what's going to happen. But let me get back. Let me find out. Let me get back to you.
Okay, you can get back to Mrs. McGinty.
Okay, that sounds good.
Very good.
And the developer's going to address the spillway, correct?
Mr. Hammer? Did you hear that?
Yeah, so maybe it might be easier if Mr. Hopkinson, the engineer, could contact us, you know, or we could get his name and we could exchange information if need be. But it wouldn't take us long to grab some additional topographic shots on his property, just to help fill in the picture.
Sure.
We do have a fair amount of shots in and around topography shots in and around Mr. Hopkinson's property, but you know, if we could just help expedite this to show some additional information to help with the comments from you know, Mr. Hardiman and Mr. Ryder and Mr. Hopkinson, we really like to do that right away. We just don't have a lot of, you know.
Do you know when you're going to do it?
Could we do it on Thursday?
Okay, this Thursday, what time?
We usually get out there around 8 o'clock in the morning. Should only take us about an hour or two.
You know, let's make it around 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, let's try that.
Okay.
And then I get a full-size copy so I can give it to my engineer too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
I can give Mr. Hopkinson the most recent set of plans as well. Just so I don't know if he's getting the revisions as they're being prepared on our end.
Mr. Hammer, could you get I think Mrs. McGinty was going to ask the same question I was going to state. If you could get the up-to-date plans to the office, and Mrs. McGinty in the office could get it to Mr. Hopkinson or his engineer. Is that all right, Anna?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we have been giving Mr. Hopkinson all the copies of everything that we're getting.
Yep.
Everything that was submitted to us.
Yep.
I just want to note that we did not get a copy of the stormwater report for September 10th or the 29th. So he doesn't have a copy of those because we don't have that on our file. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Mrs. McGinty. Mr. Hammer, you seemed a little perplexed by that.
I am perplexed, Mr. Fowler. I've hand delivered the stormwater report to the planning department. When I go to the town, I ask for Miss Alex Lauder when I submit documents.
Mm-hmm.
But I can bring, I brought the stormwater calculations to the town. That's typically the channel that I go through for submission. And if necessary, I can provide an additional copy to Miss McGinty if she needs that.
Well, that way you can have one for her and one for the office. That's fine.
So,
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just
Yes.
want to state for record, I checked with Mrs. Lauder and she did not receive those copies.
Okay.
And we don't have them in our file. So it wasn't like someone picked it up from a different department and gave it to us.
Yeah.
And I know that DPW didn't get a copy for September 10th. So I just want to make sure that's in the record, that town engineer didn't have.
Good. Thank you, Mrs.
That
McGinty.
he informed us for September 10th.
Very good. Thank you. You're hearing that, Mr. Hammer?
I hear that, Mr. Fowler, and I'll make sure I bring copies right down to her office tomorrow. I know
Very
that Mr. Hardiman has the drainage calculations, so I'll make sure I bring an additional copies over to the planning department.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Hammer. Thank you, Mrs. McGinty. Where do we stand now?
Mr. Chairman,
Who's that?
Dave Hawkinson.
Oh, hi there.
Just one thing. Through the board, the landscape plan, listening to the developer, they don't plan to do anything across especially the north border. Can I request that to the chairman that they address it, or is it going to be not addressed?
I'm not sure if I understood your question.
Okay, the developer said that they weren't aware of doing anything, basically, if I heard him correctly, anything with landscaping on my northerly border and my easterly border at that. But are they going to be doing something to it, landscaping, like fencing and things like that?
Well, I didn't, when Mr. Hammer was talking about landscaping, he was addressing some issues. I heard him say north, and I'm not sure what else. But can you give a quick summation, Mr. Hammer, as to where any landscaping will be done on the border of the two properties?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate that I just was saying that we had put landscaping within the development. I can talk with the developer and talk to some mitigation in that regard and see what he would want to propose.
Very good. I understand that.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. All right, Mr. Hopkinson. Hopefully this meeting the meeting started Friday and ended tonight. And hopefully it'll be beneficial for you and the developer.
That sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Mr. Hammer, go ahead.
Does it make sense for me to get Mr. Hopkinson's phone number, his cell phone number, so that we can coordinate on that Thursday in case something comes up?
Absolutely. I think Mr. Hopkinson, if it's all right with you, he can get that from Mrs. McGinty. Is that all right?
Absolutely. Sure.
All right, Anna?
Yep, we can share that information if that's okay with Mr. Hopkinson.
Yep, that's good. Thank you. Board members, anything else? Having none? All right. We will continue this, hopefully, with new information at 7:05 on the 26th of October. May I have a motion on that?
Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to state something for the record.
Go ahead.
So it's brought to my attention that for the land disturbance permit, with the bylaw that was changed for the general bylaw.
Yep.
In June, it was approved by the state in September, and I was notified this week that will need to be a separate land disturbance permit. The planning board can no longer waive that requirement.
Okay.
So that application has to go through public notice, etc., and that's going to have to be treated as a separate application.
Very
I'm going to
good.
put that in my memo so the applicant got a copy of that, and the board did as well, but I wanted to just state that for the record.
Very good. Mr. Hammer, you up to speed on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have to talk to Attorney Plunkett on that. I don't know if we have zoning protection on that zoning change by virtue of the land being subdivided within 7 months of the warrant article. But Mr. Plunkett knows more about those statutes than I do. But we'll most certainly comply with whatever is applicable in this case.
Mr. Chairman, Steve Sadwick, just to be clear for everybody's edification, this is a general bylaw that has to do with the stormwater management bylaw. That's chapter 19. This has nothing to do with zoning. Zoning is separate and the two things should not be commingled. So the Attorney Plunkett and I can talk about this offline, but I just wanted to clarify, this is not a zoning issue.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sadwick. Nice to hear your voice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, are we all set here? Motion to continue? Mr. Fratalia?
So move, Mr. Chairman, make a motion to continue to the, 25th of October, is that what it is, or 26th?
26th at 7:05.
7:05.
Right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. On the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Fratalia?
Aye.
Mr. Delaney? Mr. Delaney? Aye, yeah, I guess that's an aye, yes. Mr. Ryder?
Yeah, aye, sure.
Thank you for the vocalism. And the chair votes aye. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Plunkett. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next item on the agenda is sidewalk discussion. Tewksbury Department of Public Works continued from September 14th. Not a public hearing. Who's presenting this?
So I was informed that Kevin Hartman may be speaking on this, but I don't know if he wants to.
Okay.
I present the board with Mr. Chairman a memo, so I can certainly walk through you with that if you want me to.
Well, if Mr. Hartman should still be here, maybe he isn't. Mr. Hartman, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am.
Hi, Kevin. Are you planning to discuss sidewalk discussion this evening?
I would be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Well, okay. No future presentation, Kevin, right?
No, I think we provided the information the last two meetings. So,
yes. Right. I just want to make sure there's nothing more. Mr. Ryder, do you have anything?
Yes, I know the last time we talked, we were going to look at some cost analysis of the different options and looking at the status of other sidewalk projects that have started and ultimately ended, and the thoughts on starting another sidewalk project before we finish one that already started. So those are some of my concerns. I don't know if you can answer those, Kevin, or those are at a higher level. And sorry to put you at this.
Eric, if I may, could you be a little more specific as to comparing the new site compared to some other sites that are already en route?
Yes, I know we had talked North Street only went to original design back 1999. North Street was getting sidewalks between both schools, and the last project ended at Frasca Field. I'm just concerned that, one, we don't have enough money to start or complete the proposed current project. So, and that is a sidewalk to, I hate to say nowhere, but it's going to end. The least North Street would tie the Dewing School to Frasca Field, and then ultimately tie to the future development of the North Street School and the future development of downtown. I just think from a planning board, if we're going to commit our funds to a town project, I think finishing one before we starting another one where we don't have other funding coming in. So that was one concern. And I know the original sidewalk plan had sidewalks in multiple locations, and I just want to kind of get a thought why we are going a different direction than the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Mr. Hardeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Ryder. So since the last time we met with the board, we've actually expanded the scope of Shawsheen Street to tie to the sidewalk that ends near Northeast Refrigeration. I think it's Northeast Refrigeration, near Wings Junkyard there. So we've expanded the scope. So we'll have a sidewalk that goes from Main Street all the way to East Street and ties into the sidewalks up there. We have investigated other areas such as Foster Road, which was on our sidewalk plan. I worked extensively with town council, senior town council, to determine what the right-of-way was on Foster Road. And after a few months of working with surveyors, doing the research with town council, the right-of-way on Foster Road was unable to be determined, whether it was a 30-foot right-of-way or a 33-foot right-of-way. As the board knows, there's a lot of really old roads in town. That's one of them that used to cut through the Foster farm. So we unfortunately, right before COVID-19, we were supposed to have a meeting with the residents out there, and then had to postpone that because we need to talk to the residents. And if we aren't allowed to get easements or rights of entry to install the sidewalk, which effectively would be potentially somewhat on their property as well as within the town's roadway and right of way, that sidewalk project falls through. So those are kind of some of the reasons why we have to shift gears on these projects. And then also, want to note that we are going tomorrow at town meeting for an article to fund sidewalks for $850,000, $800,000 of which would be used for construction on Shawsheen Street. We have $300,000 in previous funding to bring us up to about $1.1 million in funding for sidewalks on Shawsheen Street. And we're going to do some value engineering on our design to see, how we can save some money in the construction piece, where instead of putting granite curbing on the entire length, we look at sections where vertical asphalt curbing would be appropriate. And then you save the expensive vertical granite for areas with, that need a little more protection, your curb radiuses at your roadways and things of that nature. So, that's kind of where we stand with the funding piece. I will state that back in, I think, 2004, the Sidewalk Committee developed a plan for sidewalk locations in town. And as Mr. Ryder stated, North Street was part of that. But in the top 8 projects on that list, Shawsheen Street was 3 of them. To take a sidewalk from Main Street all the way to East Street, as well as in our presentations and workshops, Shawsheen Street was mentioned at every table that attended that workshop. So Shawsheen Street, there is a demand. There's over 800 homes that are on and directly adjacent to Shawsheen Street that we'd be connecting those residents to Main Street, to Oakdale Plaza, to East Street, and the restaurants up at Kerry Plaza and things of that nature. So, we feel that Shawsheen Street's a good project for this, and like I said, we're looking to hopefully receive additional funding tomorrow night at town meeting, to get us to the construction funding that we need to make it a successful project.
Thank you, Mr. Hardeman. Mr. Ryder, you all set?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hardeman. I understand sidewalk expense, and I appreciate everything you and Mr. Gilbert do on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Anything else, Kevin, on the sidewalk for discussion?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Vitale, you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Kevin, thank you again for giving us the information every time we need it. I guess a couple of questions I have is any discussion about Whipple Road or Rogers Street at all? I mean, I travel those roads pretty regularly, and I see residents walking and always having to duck outside, into the woods to get away from cars coming. Two tough areas. I mean, so I guess I will ask you, any discussions on those 2 streets? So.
Thank you. Excellent questions. So the $850,000 we're seeking for funding tomorrow night at town meeting, $50,000 of that will be used for design of sidewalk on Whipple Road from Pleasant Street down to Chandler Street. As far as Roger Street goes, Roger Street's very challenging with the right-of-way and the slopes along that street. I don't disagree that residents do use that as a walking area, and that a sidewalk would be a benefit there. But when you look at the cost of not only the tree removal, but also the retaining walls that would be needed in that area, it becomes very cost prohibitive very quickly. So, unfortunately, that's not an area that we're going to try to focus on with sidewalks. Like I said, it would be great to have sidewalks in that area, but at this time, it's too cost prohibitive.
It doesn't solve the problem for the residents. That's the only other problem, Kevin. I understand the issues as far as the trees and so forth, but residents in town still do walk those streets, and I see it every day as I live close by. So maybe we can bring it up in another discussion, but I think it's got to be addressed at some point. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Battaglia. Mr. Delaney, any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Delaney. I think you said you're all set. Thank you. And the chair, not putting words in your mouth. And I am all set. I know what's going on with this. One second, Mrs. McGinty. There's been a problem for a long time, and you can point out to different parts of the town, and there's always hot spots that we should address. I'm going to go in the order that people presented themselves, Mrs. McGinty, and then Mr. Sadwick.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up. You had a question on the construction timeline for this.
Yes.
And I don't believe it's been discussed at tonight's meeting. So
Okay.
I spoke with Kevin Harriman on Friday. And Kevin, I'll just run through it. But please correct me if I misspeak. The timeline is to put it out to bid this January or February 2021. The start date would be in spring 2021. And then the construction end date would be anticipated for summer 2021 for the Shawshing project.
Summer 2021 or 22?
2021. So,
okay.
A short construction
That doesn't-
period. That's what I was informed. Kevin, please correct me if there's anything to add to that.
Yeah. Mr. Hadman, does that sound right to you?
2022.
Thank you. Yeah.
2022. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
the email said 2021, so that's what I reported. But 2022.
Thank you. I could see the answer to that on Stephen's face.
Just doing what the email said. So
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. McGinty. Mr. Sadwick.
So, good evening. I just wanted to point out that I guess the question had been put to Kevin, was this something at a higher level? We did have a discussion in the town manager's office to try and focus on what the principles were behind our sidewalk program. And, Kevin has pointed out that there's things that have been done in the past as far as the open houses that were held and everything else for input. But what it really came down to is that we were looking at arterials, we were looking at safety on certain roads, we were looking at loops that could be created, and then also filling in gaps. So that's kind of how we stack things up, or how we look at things in developing the plan. And as we were talking about it, it was basically, we know that the planning board has about $150,000+ in the sidewalk account, and about 50 of it has to be spent on Route 38 around Power Company Road from work that National Grid did. But that still is kind of a loose interpretation. So the town, the board could figure out somewhere in that neighborhood where you would want to spend that 50,000. that still leaves $100,000 that we haven't had a full conversation as to where the board would like to see that money spent. And that may be a good use for infill in different areas of town. If there's, a 200-foot length of sidewalk that needed to be installed to make a fuller connection of a sidewalk, that may be a place to use it. So what I would say is I would encourage the board to let staff know what you're interested in spending that 150,000+ on, so that we can kind of work it into the plan itself.
Very good. Stephen, thank you. Mr. Ryder?
Yeah, I guess Mr. Sadwick, through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Sadwick, part of that mitigations fund from the power company, and I think of the power lines along North Street, that section from the Frasca Field up to a few hundred feet. Is that something that can be used? Does that pass that within the use of near a power line? Does that work? Or I'm just thinking of spots you can fill.
Yeah, no, and that's why I kind of threw that out there, is just to get people thinking. But there, that condition of that special permit was written somewhat loosely. It wasn't that it had to be used on their frontage on Route 38. It was in the vicinity. So an argument could be made that their land runs all in the right of way, runs all the way up to North Street. So
I mean, I just think, we have a softball field there that is somewhat used now, used a lot more before COVID. And just with the two schools at the bookend, we have sidewalks on one side to the bridge at 495. And then with the new Innovation Plaza, Innovation Research Area has become much more active, and they've done a significant amount of landscaping beautification. That's another area that if you can, at some point, obviously, I understand you're moving forward with Shawsheen, and I think that's a great project. Not saying that that's not. I know there's other areas that need it, but if we can look at potential more complete street funding to use that $50,000 for design, that we can go after complete street or any other more Chapter 90 money that we can go for.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Sadwick, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question if I could.
Go right ahead,
How long
Mr.
do we have
Fratalia.
for suggestion for the sidewalk design or input?
For where?
For anywhere, I mean.
Yeah, I think you may want to do some brainstorming yourselves to kind of give it some thought as to what would be the best way of using that money. Kevin can kind of talk about how it would be programmed into the other town projects. I mean, I don't think there's a real, let's say within the next 2 months, it would be helpful if you could get us the information.
Okay. So, Kevin, while I have your, why the reason for Pleasant Street to Chandler on Whipple versus going the other way? Just curious.
So as the board knows, that's where the DPW is located. And, we noticed when. And the reason I state that is, once COVID-19 hit, we noticed a significant increase in pedestrian travel up and down Whipple Road. And I'll say that the track and cross country teams use that section of Whipple Road on a daily basis for practice, not to mention some other teams that, do their running up and down the street. We already have the sidewalk from Pleasant Street down to Long Pond. This will get residents from Whipple Road and Chandler Street also able to get down to Long Pond, to do some fishing or whatever other activities they do down there. So, ultimately, after that Whipple Road section, there's another section on Chandler Street that is programmed in the capital plan. So it'll loop Pleasant Street, Whipple Road, and Chandler all out to Main Street. to the new elementary school, the high school, the Ryan School, Town Hall, all these points of interest that we're trying to connect people to.
We could always go the other way too, up towards
Oh,
my
here we go.
house.
Thank you,
I live
Mr.
on
Hadman.
Waverly, you know that, right? Okay.
Mr. Vitalia, you all set?
All set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Mrs. McGinty, if when you have a minute, if you could put together something that information Mr. Hadman might need from the board so we can give him some input. And if, I'm not to say we need another committee, but if someone would like to co-sponsor or work along with you, that way we could get some input from the board, and we could even put it on the agenda for not a next meeting, but a meeting after this. And that way we could give Mr. Hadman some planning board direction. And we'll make Vinny in charge of that. We'll put him as chair. All right, very good. Thank you. Board members, anything else?
Question.
Go right ahead, Mrs. McGinty.
Mr. Chairman, so that
Yes.
wasn't, are you asking me to collect the questions from the board and provide that to Mr. Harriman?
No,
So the
I
projects
think
that
that
they
could be at the end, but I think we could put it on the agenda so we would know coming into a planning board meeting, that we could have a short discussion and go from there. And that way, because you're talking 5 weeks from now at the most, and then Kevin could get an idea. I mean, this isn't cast in stone. This is something that we can give him some ideas. And if Vinny gets some successful help, he can go from there. All right. Thank you, Anna. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was hoping like tonight people would have ideas, but I can certainly, if Mr. Fratalia wants to work with me as a designated representative, I can work with him.
I like that.
I don't know.
like that.
I would need someone to please be in charge of this, to contact me.
Mr. Fratalia,
So,
I nominate you.
That's a second.
Not a problem. We'll work together, and we'll get it done.
Okay.
All right, very good.
Yep, that's great. And then, so it wasn't clear to me for the Shawshene Street if the board is going to allocate funding.
Well, I didn't hear Kevin say anything about needing more funding.
Right.
So in my memo, I asked the board if you want to put any part of our sidewalk funding to the Shawshene project, because that's what Kevin was, I believe what he was asking for when he was attending tonight's meeting.
Is that right, Kevin?
So, Mr. Chairman, when I first came in front of the board, that was the request, was to ask for planning board funding to supplement our construction funding.
Right.
And, just understanding what the board is looking for. We've gone ahead to get the funding tomorrow night on the warrant article, as well as looking to supplement with Chapter 90.
Right.
So, I think if the board has, other ideas and other locations where they'd like to utilize that funding, then, we'll assist in doing so, and we can put it elsewhere.
Kevin, two things crossed my mind. Number one, we're not sure how much money you're going to be able to get Chapter 90, right? Or do you know?
So we get around $920,000 in Chapter 90 funding every year.
Okay.
And then we program that through our capital budget.
Right.
And, depending on how much the construction of Shawshene Street costs, whatever we need to supplement from Chapter 90, we would take small amounts away from, things like roadway resurfacing and things like that.
Okay. Well, is that something you need an answer today?
No, not at all.
Okay, good. Can we see what you might need? And we can also come in even after the bids are done. Would you think?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See, Mr. Sidewalk, is that all right with you?
Yep, that'll work.
Okay, good, good. All right. Anybody else from the board? Mrs. McGinty, thank you very much. And Kevin, thank you for your input.
Mr. Chairman, always a pleasure. Thank you for the board's time.
All right, thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is old business, I believe. Yes, old business. Anything for old business? Anything under new business? Mrs. McGinty, do we have any correspondence?
Yep, so it was attached in your packets. I don't have
Right.
any additional comments on that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions based on that information that Mrs. McGinty gave us for correspondence?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
picture-
Mr. Gitter, I have a question regarding the Cumberland Farms site. So you received a complaint from the abutter, right, about the problems in the back, the landscaping, right? So
Yes,
I was
that's
there,
correct.
I was there today, and looking at the site, I mean, it just seems to me, if Cumberland Farms does clean up that one side, the other side is the exact same condition with nobody owning that property at all.
Well, but Mrs. McGinty, it would be fair to say that we have no control over that at this time?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I can respond to that. So, the other side of the street,
Yeah.
I would have to look into it and get back to you, but the street itself is owned by the town, obviously, and then there's the railroad track, so I'd have to look
Railroad.
into who actually
Right,
owns
right.
that part of the property on the other side.
I mean, I agree that it should be cleaned up or maintained, one or the other, regularly, but the other side of the street is the exact same condition, maybe not as bad, but it looks pretty much the same as well. So, I mean, it's like crazy to do one thing and then have the other side look the same way. So, but
Well, we can take care of half of it, Vinny.
I agree. Half's better than nothing.
That's right. Anything else from the board on correspondence? Hearing none. We have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
The second.
You there?
Second.
On the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. Mr. Fratalia,
Aye.
Mr. Ryder,
Aye.
Mr. Delaney,
Yay.
and he's in the chair's voting aye anyway, so that's all right. Good night, Mr. Delaney. See that time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.